Hey, welcome to X-Oriente, the new voice of brotherhood. I'm your host, one of your hosts, Eric Diamond, and this is Rabbi Jason Van Horowitz.
I'll
Van
take that. I'll take that. I'll take that.
Van Dyke. Um, uh, so before we get started, a couple bits of housekeeping. First is I apologize, but I screwed up the show numbering. So for people who just follow the live stream, we've created two podcasts that we did while during Masonic Week. One is called Breakfast and one is called Lunch, and I kind of got the numbering a little screwed up there. So it's basically what happened was we did our last video broadcast before Masonic Week. We called it Resolutions, and I forgot to do the post on it and put it up on the site and on the feed. So I'm going to do that at the same time as this show goes up, and that'll be I'll number it slightly differently, but basically we're one show behind where we should be. So this show, there's no 95 will be that show, and then this show will be 96. So we're closing in on 100 episodes. I think we're going to have to do like a gala event, like be in black tie or something like that. But
Like that. White tie.
white tie. Ooh, I got to get a white tie. And so that's one thing. So if you notice the show numbering is a little weird, or like, there's an episode in there that doesn't quite chronologically fit. That's why. The other bit of housekeeping is I want to welcome a few new executive producers that have signed on. I want to welcome Brett Simon, Jose Venzor, Bill Garrison, and someone named Jorge, who hasn't given us his last name. But
Thank you.
to all of them, thank you very much. Again, you're the reason that this show is able to continue, and we're able to do some really cool stuff. And we had a great time at Masonic Week. We're talking to the Masonic Roundtable guys about possibly doing an event for next Masonic Week as a way to kind of open up the week to people who aren't necessarily in these somewhat, I won't say obscure, but somewhat, rarefied.
I'd call them obscure.
Would you?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would.
somewhat rarefied York Rite bodies. I think that there should be more actual Masonic content during that week, because it's a really great time. So we're going to be planning that, and again, that is going to be possible because of the help and support that we get from the executive producers. So with that said, let's jump right into the topic tonight. Tonight's topic came from a post that garnered, I think, something like 300 replies in the Winding Stairs Freemasonry Facebook group. And basically what was asked in the original post is, how come you guys haven't let atheists in Freemasonry yet? As if that's something that we just sort of haven't gotten around to kind of figuring out. and it, like any kind of some, semi-religious, topic, it garnered a lot of passion, a lot of speculation. And I thought that would be a really good thing for us to kind of delve into, tonight. So the topic is, the name of the show is Why We Believe. And so what I really wanted to do is kind of explore, why do we have this requirement that you believe in a supreme being, but we don't really have any sort of guidelines or although some people think we do, guidelines on what we should be believing or not. And so I guess, let me just ask you if you have any, Jason, if you have any insights as to like, why do we need to believe in a supreme being?
So I think there needs to be a base. There needs to be a foundation. Number one, that's the most basic of answers. But there needs to be a supreme being because somebody needs to hold you accountable for your choices. And so that whole rigmarole about taking a good man, making him better thing. A good man believes in God because he understands that there's a higher power, that there's something that that is that's in judgment of him, right? There's a creator, and he has to answer at some point to him. So I think that by making that a base level requirement for the organization, I think that it gives us commonality on where we're all coming from, I guess. But it's so badly said.
It's a hard. See, here's the thing. It is one of the hardest. Tough. Yeah, it is one of the hardest questions in Masonry to kind of try to answer because.
Right.
And what's even more interesting to me is that there's so many explanations that are terrible. I mean,
exactly. And mine was particularly awful.
And here's the thing. It's not because, I think people are flawed. I think that there's a lack of, I think we haven't really kind of delved into it. I think we haven't really taken it apart. So like, if you look at some of the explanations that I've seen as to why it's important to believe in God. So one of the common ones is, and even before I get to that, I just wanted to point out so that, what you said has the flaw that it assumes that an atheist can't be a good man. Right. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that, I don't think that like believing in a deity or not believing in a deity is the requirement. In other words, I don't think that that's a requirement for moral rectitude, right? I think one could be a good person and be a complete and total atheist, right? And just not believe in any sort of, God at all, God, or supreme being or anything. And I think that the judgment part has flaws because what if you're a deist, right? What if you believe that there is no judgment, that God is just this sort of organizing principle, right? Or you have some kind of non-theistic, religious sort of, like maybe you're a Buddhist, and you don't have, like the idea of a supreme being is more something like, karma or dharma or something like that. So it becomes problematic, when you start to kind of take it apart as to why this is required. And so if you look at some of the explanations that have been put forward, like one of them is that, well, you're going to take an obligation, an oath, and unless you believe in God, that oath becomes non-binding, right? So like when we go into a courtroom and, we say, I swear to tell the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God, right? If we don't believe in God, then that nullifies the character of the oath. I don't know if I buy that. Uh-oh, Jason, I lost your signal. I can't hear you.
There we go. I get what you're saying. I think that okay. It's interesting that you bring up the legal argument, right? Because have you ever heard of a thing called Pascal's wager?
No.
So Pascal, he's a philosopher, and this is a philosophical argument, meaning that it's going to use actual logic, mathematical logic as its basis. And Pascal says basically that the belief in God is a logical argument. And so if you put it into simple mathematical terms, simple logical terms, you have to believe in God, right? If you believe in God, here we go. We'll do this. All right. If you believe in God and God exists, hey, great. If you don't believe in God and God exists, bad things are going to happen to you. But if you believe in God and he doesn't exist, no harm, no foul. So there is a 66.6% chance that by believing in God, everything's going to be great for you. And so, but it's a really interesting supposition, right? And it's in all fairness, Pascal's wager is much more complex than that, and I've very much simplified it.
Who won the wager?
Well,
and what did he win?
Yeah, Pascal, and everlasting life.
I guess so.
So the thing is, though, that he's right. It's very simple math that says that, you know, if you believe in God, it's much, much better than the alternative. Right?
Well,
I mean, let's make it the most basic of things. If you believe in God, no harm, no foul. Or, hey, you win. If you don't believe in God and he exists, you're screwed.
All right, let me challenge that. Why? Why if God exists, why are you screwed if you don't believe in God? That requires you. Wait, hang on a second. That requires you to believe in a specific type of God. That requires belief, right?
100% right.
Okay.
Right. Because, I mean, I guess you could technically say that Buddhists don't subscribe to that view, right?
Yeah.
Is that they don't believe in a God that the Western tradition says God is. So you're 100% right. But again, I'm doing Pascal's wager. No real benefit. I mean, hold on a second. I can actually give you the logical suppositions that Pascal gives.
Okay. While you're pulling that up.
No, I have it right here.
Okay.
I was prepared for your disbelief. Here's the following logic is pulled from PARDES, Part 3, Section 233. Okay. 1. God is or God is not. Reason cannot decide between the two alternatives. 2. Game is being played. Whether heads or tails is turned up. 3. You must wager. It is not optional. 4. Let us weigh the gain and the loss in wagering that God is. Let us estimate those two chances. If you gain all. If you lose nothing. 5. Wager then, without hesitation, that he is. There is here an infinity of an infinitely happy life to gain, a chance of gain against a finite number of chances of loss, and what you stake is finite. So our proposition is of infinite force. When there is a finite stake in a game, where there are equal risks of gain and of loss, in the infinite to gain. 6. But some cannot believe. They should then at least learn our ability to believe, and endeavor then to conceive themselves. All right, so it's that's ridiculously complex. I mean, how I broke it down.
It's kind of callous too. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, I'm going to believe because I'm getting something in the end, not, you know.
100%, right? Okay. But is it wrong?
Well, so I would just say from, you know, sitting here from the Jewish perspective, right? I mean, and I've heard this argument a lot. There's no real commandment that says you have to believe in God. right? What the commandment says is I am the Lord your God. You will have no other gods before me, right? In other words, you're not going to worship anything that's not me. But it doesn't say you
need to worship me.
Well, it sort of does, but
does it?
Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch. There's a whole like
I'm the Lord your God. Right.
Well, that's the Ten Commandments, but there's a whole there's like a whole shelf of Talmud that basically tells you all the things that you have to do, all the sacrifices you have to make, all the all the things that you have to do to worship. But
Leviticus is literally an entire book devoted to that.
Totally. And but here's the thing: it doesn't talk about belief, right? It talks about the things that you do, and in fact, there's a very famous midrash, right, about the and I think I've talked about this on the show before, but the Jews are at the at the base of the Israelites are at the base of Mount Sinai, and God basically utters from his own mouth the Ten Commandments. And the Israelites are so freaked out by hearing God's voice that they basically tell Moses, like, look, if we have to take any more of this, we're going to die because we're just freaked out. Right. You have to go up on the mountain and just get it all down, write it all down, and bring it down to us. And as soon as God finishes uttering the Ten Commandments, the Israelites say, we will essentially in Hebrew, it's like, we will obey and we will hear you. We will listen.
Yeah.
And there's a midrash that talks about, well, why did they do it in that order, right? Why did they say we will obey? Usually you listen to something and then you obey it. Then you carry it out. And the rabbis decided that it wasn't important to believe it first. It was important to, like in Judaism, what you do trumps what you say. Or what you profess, right? Because you can profess under false pretenses. But the idea is that once you start doing it, you will come to believe it, right? So we will do and we will hear kind of means we will do what you tell us to do, and then we will come to understand why that's important. Right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
So excuse me. So I think that I kind of understand what Pascal was trying to do. I mean, he was sort of a product of his time. And so the idea of like just sort of jettisoning the idea of deity was just, for a lot of people, just like untenable. Right.
Yeah.
But getting back to the interpretation that, no oath that you take would be binding if you didn't believe, I don't necessarily subscribe to that, because I think that you can be, I mean, there are people who are atheists in the world who are perfectly honorable people. I mean, I've many friends who profess absolutely no belief in God.
But where's well, all right. So let me ask it as devil's advocate here, is then to whom do they promise, right? The issue there is that the atheist has no higher power to be feel to, and say like I promise to this higher power, and I swear it by that higher power's name. The atheist has no base on which to build what's coming next, right?
All right, so let's take that apart. So if you so basically what you're saying is, I promise whatever I'm going to promise, right? So in the case of we won't go into the actual obligation of a Mason. What we'll do is we'll substitute the obligation in a court of law, right? So when we say, I promise to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God, right?
Right.
What we're really saying is, if I go back on this oath, God will hold me accountable and somehow punish me, either in this life or in the afterlife, right? So you can, now let's turn to the Boy Scouts, right, who have their oath, right, which says, on my honor, I promise to do my best, to do my duty, to God, my country, blah, 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 right? So that's on your honor. So the idea being that if you go against that oath, you are without honor. You are no longer honorable, right?
Yeah, but again, I mean, in all fairness, Eric, they still say to God.
Yeah, but let's say
You're
that
still
they
doing
did.
your
Let's say
best to God.
they
And
said, on my honor, I promise to obey the
do
law
my best.
and do my best and do my duty. Like you could take the word God out of it, right? And it still.
But to me, that's an empty promise, right? It's a promise, and everybody can make a promise. Like on my mom, on my
right.
on my grave.
On my mom means. I mean, we talked about this in the honor episode, right?
Right.
When we talked about honor.
Yeah. Right.
On my mom means if I'm lying to you, go kill my mom. I mean, that's literally like
Right.
what the implication is, right? So there's some kind of, so in the structure of the oath, there is some penalty for being untruthful, right? On my honor, on the lives of my children, on the grave of my mother, right? Whatever those things are, right? That's the implication, right? Is that there's some sort of penalty. What you're doing is you're vouching your bona fides by saying, well,
right.
If I'm, what's that childhood thing? Like if I'm lying, 15 needles in my eye or something like that, you know what I mean? Like, right. There's some sort of penalty to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, like from that standpoint, like if you just said, by my honor, right? If for an atheist, that's his highest, attainment or on my life or on my, whatever, on my reputation, right? That is binding, maybe not in a spiritual sense, but he's not a believer anyway. So it doesn't, like it's not binding in that sense either. Right.
Right.
And so
the thing is that I think that the belief in God, in Masonry especially, is a acknowledgement that you don't understand. That you or I shouldn't say that you lack an understanding of a greater, I hesitate to say plan, but I guess plan is the best way I can say it, which is inaccurate, but it is what it is. And that you're acknowledging that there is something greater than you, that there is a greater force at work. There's something that you don't get. And to that, you'll at some point be accountable to. Does that make sense?
I think I've been thinking a lot about this since that thing came out. And I think you're definitely on the right path. I think you're on the right track. It's this idea of something greater than yourself, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. But I went back to Anderson's Constitutions, the old charges, right? And the first of the old charges reads, charge number 1 concerning God and religion. A Mason is obliged by his tenure to obey the moral law. And if he rightly understands the art, he will never be a stupid atheist nor an irreligious libertine. Right? I'm gonna let me just read that again, because there's a lot to unpack there.
There really is.
And I pulled out my little PARDES toolbox and started kind of taking it apart. Right? So a Mason is obliged by his tenure, right, to obey the moral law. And if he rightly understands the art, he will never be a stupid atheist nor an irreligious libertine. So I want to unpack that a little bit, because first of all, I want to know, obliged by his tenure. What does that mean? Obliged by his tenure. What is the tenure of a Mason? I mean, I kind of think it's his life, right? A tenure is like your tenure as president or your tenure as a,
right. It's your
my tenure as the worshipful master of my lodge was a year, right?
Right.
So your tenure,
your tenure is your time in office,
right?
Right.
Or in this case, your time working in the quarries or the, working in the craft, right?
Right. And you're obliged to it, meaning that, that you have sworn to it. So you're sworn to your time duly elected, I guess.
Well, think of it, take the officer thing out of it. Think of it like this. Think of it like if you're working in the craft.
Okay. But working in the craft is an office.
It is.
I mean, being elected just as a member is an office.
Yeah.
You're elected.
Sure.
So, all right.
Yeah. But in other words, let's say that we're built so for example, if you're obliged by your, say you're a rocket scientist. Say you're working for Elon Musk, working on the Falcon Heavy, right? You're
Not
obliged.
Yeah. I'm that smart.
You're obliged by your tenure as an engineer to make sure that the rocket goes up and the rocket comes down and lands safely and doesn't explode. And, there's all these things that right. if you're doing your work,
right,
you're subscribing to certain principles that become self-evident, right? Like nobody works at a job to be bad at it, right? So you're obliged by your work to obey moral law. In other words, what it's saying, I think, is that you can't work at the craft and not be moral, because the craft is itself a moral work. We're building our inner temple. We're building our, we're building a sense of morality within us. So just the nature of the work is that you obey the moral law.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think that's what that means.
Okay.
A Mason is obliged by his tenure to obey the moral law. In other words, if you're not obeying the moral law, you're not really doing Masonry. I mean, you're not doing yourself any favors either, but you're not actually practicing Masonry. You're doing something else. You're scamming people, or maybe you're a degree mill, or maybe you're a, maybe you're a conspiracy theorist writing a book or something, right? You're not practicing Masonry. You're doing something else, right? So if you are practicing Masonry, then obeying the moral law is an essential part of that. I think that's what that line means. Is that?
No, that reads pretty true.
Okay. So then it says, and if he rightly understands the art, and art is capitalized. And I know that, it's funny. My wife always teases me because I do that all the time. Like when I used to write. So I used to not be able to type at all. In fact, I still can't type. So I write whenever I write stuff, I always write it out longhand, and then I type it. And now I just dictate into the computer and let, and then correct it. But in the olden days before that, my wife, who's an excellent typist, would type all my stuff for me, which is,
wow,
horrifying. And, she saved my life, many, many times over. And she would always tease me because I would capitalize letters just sort of randomly like that, just as I was writing with a pen. Right. And she said, you must have been like Ben Franklin in it. Yeah. I'm German or Ben Franklin in another life.
All nouns are capitalized.
Yeah. But so he says, if he rightly understands the art, and art is capitalized, right? He will never be a stupid atheist nor an irreligious libertine. And I was really interested by that because I'm like, can one be a smart atheist and a religious libertine? Right? Like what is it about? So this is where I kind of pulled the PARDES, the PARDES army knife out and, pulled out the different blades and started taking it apart.
Sure.
Right. And so I thought to myself, like, what a stupid atheist versus a smart atheist, right? Could one be a smart atheist? I think the answer is probably yes. But what would be a stupid atheist? And I don't think he was. Here's the thing. And maybe this is me wanting to believe something, but yeah. I don't believe that he used that word just sort of like, you're a dumb poopy head, like.
I do.
Do you?
See, I believe, yeah. I believe it's an adjective that he threw it in there for color.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he threw it in there for emphasis. I think he threw it in there to highlight and to show people, like, let me be very clear about what I'm saying here. And it's very clear to me.
Mm-hmm.
Stupid atheist. Stupid, even in those times, stupid is a strong word. It's a very strong adjective.
Yeah.
And I think that he uses it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting to me is that I think that sentence structure wise, I think that his writing is gorgeous, because he says stupid atheist, irreligious, libertine, right? And that's a beautiful structure, because he's giving emphasis to stupid, because it's a really strong adjective, to atheist, and irreligious is just he's irreligious, right? Atheist is also strong, but irreligious means I don't really care. I'm just irreligious, whatever. Libertine is a strong noun. Libertine means a very precise thing, as does stupid, right? And so, like, stupid, atheist, irreligious, libertine, the construction of that, to me, is interesting. It's interesting because it's rhetorically, it's attractive to me. I look at it and I'm like, wow, it's well constructed. You go stupid adjective.
Mm-hmm.
Noun is atheist. Irreligious adjective. Libertine is a noun, and it goes strong, weak, strong. To me, it just, the way that it's constructed is very clever.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I think that it's constructed in a way that's there to grab your attention. It's not to say anything deeper than that. It's just to grab your attention. It's to say irreligious and libertine are the same thing. It's not irreligious. It's libertine and atheist are the same thing.
Libertine and atheist are the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it's saying it in a hyperbolic way, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
He's being very colorful there,
mm-hmm.
and he's being colorful on purpose. He's doing it to highlight that a stupid atheist or an irreligious libertine are the same thing, and that one must have a fear or respect. Fear meaning respect for God, for
mm-hmm.
something that's greater than you, to understand what the morality that we're trying to teach. And that's what lies underneath this, is morality.
Mm-hmm.
An atheist or a libertine has no morality. There's no basis for that morality, right? There's no base. It doesn't exist. It's whatever they subscribe to. And so it could be a high morality, but it could be a low morality. Who knows? We have no idea. But if you're if you believe in God, well, all right, now I get it. Yeah, then there's a base there that we all understand.
Okay, So let's look at the example historically of two guys. One is Caesar Borgia, who became Pope, right? And
with the Borgias, okay, keep going.
So and Jim Baker, remember Jim Baker?
The televangelist.
Yeah, televangelist. So in both those cases, those guys were libertines. I mean, they indulged in sins of the flesh, right?
That they did, and then some,
and then some. But they were religious, right? So I think you can
Correct.
be a religious libertine, and I think the distinction here is that to a religious libertine, they know what they're doing is wrong. They're aware that what they're doing transgresses some kind of moral law, right? An irreligious libertine doesn't have that, right?
Yeah, agreed.
They're like, whatever.
Yeah, right. I agree with that.
Right?
I
want to, snort cocaine and sleep with women, or whatever.
Right.
And there's no sense of like what I'm doing is wrong. Right. That's sort of, to me, what an irreligious libertine is. There's nothing that's anchoring them to any sense of morality. A religious libertine at least knows that what they're doing is wrong and they do it anyway.
Right.
Right.
I'll buy that.
And a libertine, just for people who aren't familiar with the term, is just someone who just pursues the
joy.
Yeah, just the pleasures of whatever they want to do. Yeah, whatever they want to do, whatever feels good, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then the idea of a stupid atheist, right? And I've seen I've always regarded guys like who's the guy who just recently died? He was like a really famous Dworkin. No, not Dworkin. I can't remember his name.
Anton LaVey?
No. Oh, well, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, yes. All right, so let's use him because that's a really good example of a stupid atheist.
Exactly.
Right?
Was he an atheist?
Yeah, no, he was, because he did. He said, well, here's the thing. This is why he's a stupid atheist, right?
Okay.
Because the Church of Satan, when you actually look at what they believe,
right,
they are atheists, right? But a stupid atheist is one that, here's the sort of the logical flaw of Satanism, right? Mm-hmm. Is that Satanism is, Satan is the antithesis of God. So in order to be an atheist, you're basically you're rebelling against God, which sort of has to presuppose that there is a God. So
right,
if you're anti-God, right, then you're acknowledging the existence of God, as opposed to like just someone who's an atheist who just is like there's no God. And if there's no God, then why am I dressing up in black robes and having, pentagrams with goats inside and, stuff like, right?
So, which is why I think that he's a irreligious libertine. Well, I take that back. He's not irreligious. He's
religious. Yeah, he's got religion.
He's a religious libertine.
It's kind of a weird one, but yeah, he's got religion.
He's a religious libertine. But I mean, I don't think he's an atheist. I don't think that Satanism is atheist, actually. Because again, I agree with you, is that you have to presuppose that there is a God and then do opposite of that.
Right.
Right.
A Satanist is somebody who.
Right. Yeah.
Who is in constant tension with the God of the Bible,
okay.
right?
I'm going to take this in a whole different direction, but I don't care. So could a Satanist be a Mason?
No.
Why?
Because they're a stupid atheist. No, well,
but they believe in God.
They don't. They don't.
Yeah, but they do. They totally believe in God. They just think that he's an asshole and want to do the opposite. Do you see what I'm saying? Right? It's hilarious because technically, like the truth of the matter is, do you believe in God? Sure. Don't like him, but I believe in him. You know, think he's totally wrong. Cast my lot with that guy Satan, but I totally believe in God.
Yeah,
Could he
I
be
don't buy it.
amazing?
I don't buy it because the idea. All right, so the idea, the standard is that it's belief in a supreme being. And if God,
Yeah,
all right, now hang on a
they're
second.
there.
If God is the supreme being, why would you worship something that is not the supreme being? Just to piss off God? I mean, that sounds pretty stupid to me. That just sounds right.
All right, so wait, so hold on a second. So our our Facebook feed, this is great.
Is it blowing
'Cause
up?
Yeah, they get what I'm saying. They get where I'm coming from. So Joe Martinez says, yeah, they do profess in a supreme being. They just choose to rebel against him. 100% right. 100% right. Right.
Then,
So like,
then they're not believing in.
which all right. So Mike Hambrick,
Maybe you have to.
Mike Hambrick,
Okay.
rightly says, which means that they can't be good men.
Voila.
Good job, Mike. So, like, this is interesting as hell. This is a great argument, right? This is a great philosophical argument because, right, so are you a good man, right? If you're a Satanist, yes, you believe in God, but are you a good man that we're going to make better? Probably not. So that's hilarious. All right, Rob Matherly. This is a great one too. Can you put your trust in God if you worship his polar opposite?
No, you cannot.
That's beautiful. That is a gorgeous, honestly, a gorgeous argument because it's amazing. To whom do you put your trust? Satan. Nah, but not really, because I know that he's going to screw me over. That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And I mean here and again, speaking as the Jew in the room, right? Like Jews have a completely different understanding of Satan, right?
Absolutely.
Satan is not the antithesis of God. Satan works for God. Satan is the antithesis of man. Right? Satan is the guy who's basically whispering in God's ear saying, they're terrible people. You really need to get rid of them. You know, like he's not rebelling. All that stuff about the fall and original sin. And, you know, we have none of that stuff, right? It's to us. I mean, Satan only appears really in the book of Job. And he's you know, the word in Hebrew just means the adversary. Well, who's the adversary against? Well, in the Jewish interpretation, he's the adversary of man, not of God. Right. You know, he's sort of God's prosecutor.
Right. And it's not until us New Testament idiots come along that we really flesh out Satan. And really Satan as opposed to God is really not a thing until Western culture understands Eastern culture with the yin and the yang, and that understanding that there is no light without dark, and vice versa.
Well, I think it's a medieval thing. I think because when you look at so for example, you have Jesus in the desert, right? And Jesus is in 40 days in the desert, and he's tempted by Satan. Well,
right.
What is Satan doing? Satan is tempting him to then go back to God and say, "See, even your son can't follow your own rules," right? So he's trying to trip up Jesus. In other words, he's not there to he's not fighting against God. He's not trying to win over a convert. He's trying to get Jesus to screw up and then go back to God and say, "See, I told you."
Right. Which is hilarious, by the way, that that Judaism is based on laws. Yeah. And it's based on strict adherence to laws.
Yeah.
And that Satan is there going, so how you doing with those laws?
Yeah, right.
Can I show you some things about those laws?
Yeah.
But to me, honestly, it really has to do with the yin and the yang. It has to do with there is no darkness without light, and vice versa.
Yeah.
That you cannot understand or know one or the other without both.
Totally. And in Kabbalah, we talk about that all the time. So that
Exactly.
the idea is that, as the neo-futurists used to say, too much light makes the baby go blind, right? That was the name of their long-running show.
That's great. I like that.
Yeah. But that's sort of the idea. So in Kabbalah, the idea of evil is the discriminating influence. They call it Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. And basically what that is to separate yourself from the collective, right? And Yetzer HaTov, the good inclination, is to unite. It's wanting to unite. And too much uniting is bad, right? Because then you lose your sense of identity, right? So that like when you look at sort of the idea of extreme collectivization, you're looking at like, communism under Mao, right? Like no individual has any rights.
Correct.
It's all the collective, right? But if you have too much evil, right, you're separating yourself from the group, which includes God, right? And you're isolating yourself. So the idea of the tessellated pavement, right, of good and evil, right, is you have to keep these two inclinations in balance, right?
Correct.
So God doesn't, in the Kabbalistic sense, God doesn't represent pure good and the devil pure evil, right?
Right.
God is all of that and none of that. It's outside of human conception, right? So it's
right. There you go.
These inclinations are inside of us, not necessarily in the.
What's incredible, I think, is that especially Christians and me, a little Catholic boy included in that, is that we miss entirely that God is Satan as well.
Wait, you're
right?
Catholic? No, I'm kidding.
It's terrible. Yeah. It's terrible. But we miss the point that God is also Satan, and that he encompasses everything, and that good, evil, it's all him. Period. End of story.
Well, yeah.
I think that's fascinating. That's a topic for
that's a different. Yeah, that's another show.
It's a whole other show. But all right. So Mike Hambrick just said, all right. So now back to the atheist question, which good for you, Mike. If there isn't a belief in a God, what afterlife are you perfecting your ashlar for? Yeah.
Ooh.
That's
good question, but wrong question.
No. Right? All right. Tell me why, because I think that's a great question.
Because that's not why we build the temple. In my interpretation, here's the thing: when a Mason dies,
Strong take.
I know.
That's a hot take.
I know.
Hot takes happen.
When a Mason dies, what do we do? What's our ritual? Right? We take his apron and we place it on the body and we clip the strings. We clip the strings. We clip the strings to symbolize that he is no longer obligated. He's no longer obligated. Yeah. He is no longer obligated. And that comes from an old Jewish tradition, right? So when a Jew dies, the idea is like when you have a traditional Jewish funeral, it's supposed to be very simple. The idea is to get the body in the ground and decomposing as quickly as possible, right? Because in Judaism, like the most unholy, defiled thing is a dead body, right? So you wrap them in their talit, right, which is their prayer shawl, and you clip the corners. So the corners of the garments have fringes on them, right? Because it says it in Exodus, you'll put fringes on the corners of garments, right?
Right.
So when a Jew dies, they clip the strings off the corners because it's a symbol that says you're not obligated anymore. All these commandments that God's given you, you're no longer obligated by any of them anymore. Because the Torah was given to the living, right? Masonry is a pursuit of the living. We say of the Masons that are gone that they've passed to
their question. Actually, this is I think that's interesting. Is it?
Yeah,
I think that's a pretty strong assumption on your part, because the third degree tells me differently. And
all the third degree tells us is without getting into the third degree.
Right. There's a lot going on here that
Right.
we can't talk about,
Yeah.
but I would love to talk about explicitly because I think you're wrong.
Okay.
I would oh,
I know.
this is a good conversation.
We got to do like a tiled show, but
You have to, because that I mean it's an incredible assumption on your part that you're done with your obligation. I disagree. I think that your obligation is only beginning. In that and okay, I'm not going to say anymore, but killing me right now.
I know. I here's so I but here's what I would say. I think that Masonry teaches us how to live, how to treat each other, how to exist in the world as a moral person. And once we're done, right? Once we shuffle off this mortal coil, we're in God's hands.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever that means, whether that means that we reincarnate, whether that means that we go to heaven or hell or whatever your particular flavor of religion is, that's what happens to us, right?
Yeah, I'll buy that.
So how Masonry gets practiced after the living, we have no conception of and we have no control over, because that supreme being, whoever he, she, it, them is, has not chosen to reveal that to us as humans. That's still one of the great mysteries of life. So those obligations, right? None of those apply because it's a different quarry that we're in. It's a different place that we're in. So, all right, let's table that, because that's a different.
It's such a tiled episode.
I know. It's a tiled episode.
I want to argue with you so bad.
I know.
It's so bad.
I know.
It's so bad.
But I think here's the thing.
Oh, you dick.
All right. So here's the thing. I think that there's
terrible. Terrible.
I know. I'm a bad.
Yeah.
I'm a bad person.
You're a horrible host.
So all right. So here's
host hell.
Host hell.
You're going to host hell.
Is that a hostel?
Made that up.
Is that like
you're going to host hell. Actually, a hostel is very close.
Host hell. You're right.
Yeah, it's very close. Generally in about the neighborhood that you would assume is host hell. But yeah. So we're gonna have this argument at some point.
I know we will.
This is awful.
So I think that there's a simpler explanation.
Okay.
And it boils down to the Enlightenment. So here's my plug. I started reading a book. So here's what happened at Masonic Week. So Friday night I gave my speech, and I sort of I talked about it a little bit in the episode that's going to be uploaded, just before this one is uploaded, in our New Year's resolution show. But basically, I gave a speech about something called the Dark Enlightenment, which we're going to talk about more. And in fact, I recorded that speech, and it is available if you're an executive producer. It's part of the exclusive content that's available to the executive producers. So that's another. So good. I know, it's just one of the reasons. And I thought, here's the thing. I thought when I gave that speech, it was going to be a bit of a bomb thrower. And then I got into the room, and all the people, I had this and I should have known. Here's the thing. I should know better because I'm on the board of directors of the Masonic Society. Plug for the Masonic Society. But I sort of had this idea, flawed as it was, that the membership was younger than it was. So I get in the room and I see that most of the people there are either my age or older. And I'm thinking to myself, it was like that moment in Animal House when they walk into the all black club and they're like, "We are going to die." That's kind of how
we dance with your dates.
That's right. I felt like I'm a dead man, because this is what I was about to say. I thought was controversial for anybody, but for these, for older, more traditional guys, this might be like, pearl clutching. So I was really surprised. I was surprised because not only did it went over as well as it did, there was about 45 minutes of discussion afterward and they had to cut it short because they were going to get kicked out of the room.
Right.
And then, like, people came up to me and said, "Oh, you have to publish this. Are you going to publish this?" And I said, "Yeah, well, it'll get published somewhere at some point." I mean, right now it's available to the executive producers, but basically what that speech was about our ties to the Enlightenment and how we need to reconnect with those values, because Masonry emerged in 1717 right as the Enlightenment was just kind of hitting the gas pedal. And it is a product of the Enlightenment, and it is a driver of the Enlightenment. And so a lot of the ideas, like when you look at like documents like Anderson's constitutions and things like that, they were products of the Enlightenment. And I think that there's an Enlightenment explanation as to why the belief in a supreme being is necessary. And it goes something like this. Okay. One of the principles of the Enlightenment is that you have to hold ideas to an objective standard. Right? There has to be some kind of measure. Like, that's the whole idea of the empirical method, right? Is that we have a hypothesis and we hold it to the body of knowledge that has come before it, and that we hold it against some kind of empirical standard. And then we test our assumptions, our hypotheses against that standard. And if it
passes or fails,
it passes or fails, that's how we base a merit. Enlightened values say we don't take things on authority. We don't take things on faith, right? We examine them and we deal with them in an empirical manner. If Masonry is about morality, right? And morality is, the ideas of morality have to be measured against something objective that is greater than yourself. Mm-hmm. Right? Whatever that is. And Masonry doesn't prescribe what that thing is, right? Masonry doesn't say, well, that objective standard is the Torah, or that objective standard is the New Testament, or that objective standard. It doesn't matter. Whatever that sacred volume of law is, right, that is on the altar, doesn't matter. Could be anything. Could be the Vedas. Could be the Quran. It could be the Torah. It could be the Tanakh. It could be the King James Bible or the New Improved Version or whatever, right? It could be any of those things. The need to believe is that objective reality that says that there's something greater than ourselves, that we are measuring our progress as Masons against. So I think what you said earlier, Jason, was absolutely dead on, right? That there has to be something greater than ourselves that we measure our progress against. And without that, we're moralists, right? Without that, we are, and this kind of gets back to what a stupid atheist is. A stupid atheist is somebody who believes that there's nothing greater than man. And if there's nothing greater than man, then anything man does is okay, because there's nothing greater than man. There's nothing that is holding them. There's no anchor. There's nothing holding them to a higher standard, right? So man, if there's nothing greater than man, then man is effectively God, and man can do no wrong, right? And so if that's the case, then there's no need for morality, and there's no need to perfect ourselves, because we're already perfect, right? There's no standard to hold ourselves against.
Correct.
And so I think what Masonry is saying to us is that you have to have some standard, some objective standard to measure your work against. Right?
Right.
So one of the things that I love, I just recently learned about this is, like, why is there, it was the question, like, I always wondered, like, why the past master symbol is the compasses with the protractor.
The arc.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is that the protractor tells you how far apart the compasses go. And then once you have the wisdom to figure out what that angle is, you then take the compasses and you hand them off to the mason, the master mason, and you say, okay, you're now a master mason. Go shape your ashlar to this particular angle.
Mm-hmm.
Build your circle. This is the circumscribed circle that you become a point in the center of. But the diameter of that circle is determined by the protractor.
Correct.
Right. And so that's why that thing exists. So there needs to be something to measure against. And that's why it's important to believe in something higher than yourself. Because without it, there's nowhere to go. There's no improvement.
You can even simplify that and take it away from masonry, but simplify that even greater by saying, what's a ruler? A ruler is just a stick without the pips. If you don't have the measurements in that ruler, how do you know what anything is? It's just a stick. But as soon as you put little hash marks in at perfect intervals, it's nothing.
Right. And here it gets even more interesting, right? I'm glad you brought that up, because up until the Enlightenment, right, a yard,
that's right,
was whatever. What was it, like the length of the king's arm?
No, it's the foot. The foot. The foot was literally the length of the king's foot.
The king's foot. All right. So the foot was the length of the king's foot, right? And so if the king died and we got a short king,
changed.
Right? The foot changed. And so basically from a moral perspective, is what you're saying is that there really is no standard, right?
Correct.
And the guys in the Enlightenment said, no, this is not cool. So they built a meter, right? Which is it was a bar of, what was it? Platinum?
I don't remember.
I think it was platinum. I think it was a bar of platinum, because that was at the time the most stable metal, like the least subjective to like expansion and contraction and stuff like that. And that meter, that bar still exists. And basically what they said is, here's this bar, we're going to call this a meter, and we're going to stick it in a vault in, I don't know, it's in France somewhere, I think. Right. One of the hotbeds of the Enlightenment. And every meter is going to be measured off that after that massive meter. And it wasn't until, like, I don't know, 1920s or 1930s when they figured out, like, there was a way to calculate the meter in a more accurate way by looking at the wavelength of light, like a certain number of angstroms constitutes a meter, right? But
Same
until
thing
that,
with Graham.
yeah, exactly. So up until that point, and I remember seeing there when I was a kid, it's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, I think, in where is it? Like in Maryland, DC, somewhere. It's somewhere in the DC area. But at the time, when I was a kid, it was called the National Bureau of Standards, and I remember taking a field trip, and they showed us, the yard, right? And it was this bar of metal. And they said, that is the yard. That's what we measure every yard against in the United States. That's the standard that we measure against.
Right.
And so there's this idea that, and it wasn't until the Enlightenment that we had that standard, right? So I think that this is again a product of the Enlightenment, to say, when you're measuring morality, you have to have some kind of standard basis, right? To measure against. And if you're an atheist, right, you don't have that, and you're not,
it's
whatever
really
you have is artificial. You could say, well, we're going to use cultural norms. Well, that's great until cultural norms change.
And whatever you have as an atheist is different from those who believe in God. Because those who believe in God, the greater group who believe in God, all have the same basis. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot like saying, like, well, listen, we're going to measure by the gram, which I know that's I believe it's kept in Paris, in a vault in Paris, and the gram is this tiny little piece of metal. I don't remember what it's actually made of, but it's a really dense metal.
It's like platinum.
And
I think it's
no, it's denser than that. It's not a precious metal. It's actually it's like lead or something like that, and it is literally the gram. And all they care about is that it doesn't change, and that it's kept in like this vacuum, and it is what it is. It's a gram, and it will never ever change. It will never vary, and the whole point of that is that it gives people a basis on which to build things off of, and anybody anywhere can give a measurement that's relative to that one measurement in mass. And the thing is that the whole point here is that if they were to say, well, it's the foot or it's the cubit, as Mike Hambrick pointed out, actually the cubit was the length of the king's arm, and
from elbow to tips. Yeah.
So if it's a cubit, well, the cubit changes. It is, it's still a cubit, but it changes. It's slight, but it changes. And that's, that's not exact. It's not what you're looking for. And what we're doing is exact. The Enlightenment was all about being exacting. It was all about saying, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's why we don't know. And that to me is the most interesting part of the Enlightenment, is that the Enlightenment quantified the things that we know and the things that we don't. Why we don't. And that's the most interesting thing, is why don't we know? And how can we fight against that and try our best to know those things? Here's my shameless plug, is that Eric and I are reading this book right now. And Eric found it during Masonic Week and freaked out. And it's called Enlightenment Now. Eric, the author,
is Steven Pinker.
Yeah, Steven Pinker.
He's a cognitive scientist teaches at Harvard.
And it's stupid good. It's so amazing. And Pinker points out in his book that, in fact, his first chapter is called Dare to Know, or Dare to Understand, or something like that. And what I found great about that is that my lodge that I founded, the Colonial Lodge, our motto is Sapere Aude, which is Latin for dare to know. And that's the first chapter, which is all about just how, like, the what's the word I'm looking for? It's the moxie that these guys had to just try to understand these things is incredible. When you go back to the 1600s, the church ruled everything,
right?
And they went, but let's try and quantify it. Let's put some barriers on that. Let's figure out exactly what we know, and then let's build off that. And it's incredible the balls of these guys to say, well, let's know things.
Well, that's why like, traditionally, like, fundamentalist churches and, the Catholic Church kind of in and out, just hates Masons, because
absolutely
we're not taking the authority
correct
of someone's interpretation of, we're
correct.
saying, no, we need to know for ourselves. We need to be measuring against something, which is why we ask, do you believe in a supreme being? And once the answer is yes, we don't right. care what flavor that is after that, because that's going to be, that's going to be different. But all religions have certain things that are common to it.
Correct. That
are common to each other about how to treat each other. There's some really interesting work by a guy by the name of Shalom Schwartz, he's a professor at, he teaches at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and he's developed what he calls universal values that are present in every culture. And what's interesting is that there are these like 50 to, it varies, like 55 to 65 of these universal values that are present in every single culture on earth. So there are things that all religions have in common about how we treat each other, and it, in terms of morality and what we should be kind of doing as a community. So I think to me, that's why it's important that we have a belief in a supreme being. And I think even when you look at some of the French traditions where they've basically removed religion, right? What they said is like, look, the religion that you are is so unimportant that the question of whether to have religion or not is also unimportant. So we're not going to address it. And I think that was a bit of a mistake. I think, I know that like at the time, this is about 1870, I think it was either 1871 or 1873 when this split happened. But I think that, what you started to see where certain French lodges were putting a blank book on the altar instead of a volume of sacred law, to symbolize that it doesn't matter, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's sort of, I think it's taking a step too far, because then you're getting back to this sort of idea that, morality is whatever we say it is. And that's not Masonry. Right.
Right. And the best part of the Enlightenment is that the Enlightenment wasn't a threat to the church. I mean,
right.
At various times they found it that way, but for the most part, it really wasn't. It was just about saying, well, all right, it is God, but how far? How can we boil that down?
Yeah.
And say, here is where God lives.
And I think what one of the also the core values, and Pinker talks about this in his book. And in fact, all right, so I have to tell you this story. So I gave this speech on Friday about the Enlightenment, right?
Right.
And on Sunday morning, everybody's getting ready to go home, and the bellhop of the hotel comes to me and he gives me a copy of the Sunday Post, the Washington Post, mm-hmm. And he says, he have this Washington Post, and I'm like, oh, thank you. So I had some time to kill. So I walked over sat down and started reading the paper, and I get to the editorial page, and there's an excerpt from this book, from Steven Pinker's book. And it turned out that the publication date was that Sunday. And I immediately read this article, and it's, like at the bottom, it says, this is excerpted from Steven Pinker's new book, Enlightenment Now. And I'm like, all right, I'm there. Went to Amazon, downloaded it on my Kindle, and on the plane ride home, I was, already, knee deep in this amazing book, to the point where I think a lot of what we're going to talk about this season is going to be on sort of the ideas of the Enlightenment and how, as Masons, we can reconnect to those ideals, and also, by doing that, reconnect with our social relevance.
Absolutely. And who we are is so linked to the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it is hand in hand. I mean, we are the Enlightenment, really, when you think about it.
The shock troops of the Enlightenment.
So, right, the shock troops of the Enlightenment.
Right. To
coin a Joe Crociata phrase, and an Eric Diamond speech piece. Interesting thing, the BBC did a documentary following the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. And it was really good. They filmed a little bit of it in DC, and it was right around the time of the installation of our new Grand Master. And the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Scotland, who they call the Grand Master Mason, he came, actually. And so this film crew came, and the producer and I were talking while they were here, and man, that producer, not a Mason, really knew his stuff, really did a lot of really good research and reading, and like I could tell he actually read the books and wasn't just told by Robert Cooper, like, here's the gist. He wasn't given the cliff notes. He actually read the books, and he impressed the hell out of me, frankly. And he sent me the finished documentary, which is actually playing right now on BBC One. And oh my God, is it good? And they start the first like minute to 2 minutes is Masons. They're creepy, rolled up trouser legs, kind of junk. The entirety of 58 minutes after that is all about no. They're way cooler than that. Here's why.
Is that available online?
It is not, as far as I know, right now. I'm working on stuff with the producer right now to try and find a way to get that all over the place. Because believe me, they want it all over the place.
Yeah. I'm not about bribery.
Yeah, right. And so I'm working with them, trying to figure out what we can put up. Because right now, I mean, we're talking spanky fresh on BBC One over there. And I don't know if it's just running in Scotland or if it's running all the way through the United Kingdom. But it's fresh to them. So I don't know when we're able to put it up. I have a copy of the whole video, which is it's so good. It is so good. Honestly, I've never seen a more honest and truthful telling of what Freemasonry really is. It's fabulous, and it's so well done. It's done in incredible BBC style. It's great. So at any rate, but Greg, the producer, is very much interested in doing something here, which is even better. It's good news for Freemasonry is that finally we've got people who understand what we're about. They finally figured it out. And they're putting it out there for people. They're showing people that we are what the Enlightenment. We are the prodigy of the Enlightenment. And it's really fantastic stuff. So finally, thank God somebody gets it right. And it's not just that Pinker book. And that Pinker book is so good. It's incredible.
I want to see if we can get him on the show.
He would be fantastic. It would be incredible to talk to that guy. Yeah. Because he gets it. He totally gets it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And what's cool, I mean, again, another plug for the book. What's cool about this book is that what he really says is that as bad as you think the world is right now, we live in a world of fear, right? We're constantly being made to fear everything. We fear, what we eat. We fear who we associate with. We fear each other, right? I mean,
and fear is easy.
Just turn on the news. In fact, there's a really great. I'm not usually a big Morrissey fan, but Morrissey recently came out with an album, and he on this album is a song called "I Spent the Day in Bed," and basically it kind of goes. He says, I spent the day in bed. It was really, really great. I'm normally not my own type, but I really enjoyed myself. But then the chorus is, I advise my friends to stop watching the news because the news contrives to frighten you. And I thought, yeah, it does. Right. But that is what the Enlightenment is about. It's about,
right.
Shedding light on this darkness and,
correct.
And not living in fear because we are able to know things. And so what he does is sort of in the middle of the book, and I'm about, I would say a little over halfway into it. He talks about how things are actually really pretty good right now. I mean, even with all the crap that's going on, like poverty is like way down around the world. We're way healthier than we ever were. We have a better standard of living. And so what he says is that the whole idea of the Enlightenment is about improving the condition of humanity. right? And we're gonna talk a lot more about all the ideas that are part of this. But we wanted to start out with the very first charge because that's kind of central to Freemasonry, is this requirement that we believe in some kind of supreme being, and why that's important and why we can't just abandon it.
And Eric, I think we've won that argument.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's done.
And I think this is a good place to stop for the night. I want to thank our executive producers and everybody who came to the live stream. What I've learned during Masonic Week is that it's nearly impossible to do live streaming from a remote location, just because the connectivity is so spotty, and so not to mention the need for lighting and equipment, and I have to carry this screen behind me, and it's just it's
ungainly.
Right, it's ungainly. So we'll continue to do remote stuff, and in fact, I just invested in some new equipment that's going to make that a little bit better in terms of quality. But we'll continue to do video live streams when we're in the studio, and add some more guests. So thanks for being here. Tell your friends about X-Oriente. What we're about to be embarking on is nothing less than the reconnection of ourselves to what Masonry aspired to be, back in the 1600s. We need to reconnect to that again, and the world needs us more than it ever has. Anything else? Anything else to add?
No, that was pretty good. And I'd like to also thank the executive producers. You guys are fantastic, and thank you so much for everything that you do for us. It truly does make everything that we do possible. Yeah. So thank you.
And to become an executive producer, go to our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/X-Oriente. Make a pledge, and you'll be able to you'll get a lovely welcome kit, and to our newer executive producers. I'm putting those together this week, so you should be getting them real soon. And then you'll also be able to download and listen to the speech that I gave at Masonic Week, and then we'll at some point we'll make it more widely available, and start to take that one apart as well. But all right, so thank you guys for coming, and like I said, tell your friends, stay subscribed, and Fiat Vox, everybody.
Good night, everybody.